So I'll just come back and share a few thoughts on the future of the UK economy. And I guess the headlines are, in the short term, we are seeing growth and inflation out of the UK economy with some focus on the labour market. So there's still a bit of growth. We'll come and share some of that. There is still inflation that's coming down, but it's going to be very hard to come back down to the 2% rate. And continuing, I suspect all of you are feeling continued challenges in the labour market, very tight labour market, and a changing skills requirement, and we'll touch on that perhaps in the longer term. So there are mega trends, and these are trends that are partly influenced by some of the global picture, partly influenced by the UK position that it's in. And we're thinking about how those are going to affect the UK economy in years to come. So just on the short term, I guess some of this everybody will probably have picked up in the press. We have revised our ONS data that now suggests that actually we can't really.
Can I ask you, will you balance that?
ONS has revised its 2021 GDP data, and it now suggests we actually did reach our pre-COVID levels 2 years ago, and actually up until recently it was suggesting we're still recovering to our pre-COVID levels. So we're back where we were. We're no longer the laggard of the G7, but we're certainly not in a position, I think, to be really proud of where we are, only slightly ahead of France and Germany. And I guess the message is always these will continue to get revised. And I think I heard that France and Germany may have still got to revise theirs. So who's a betting man? So it wouldn't be that France and Germany perhaps are better placed than what this original data shows. But overall, whilst the revisions show that we have had some growth, without a doubt, we have an overall weaker picture of the UK economy. And I think this is a really interesting slide to show what's really happened here since the financial crisis back in 2007-8. The top dotted line shows the trend that we were on going back pre-financial crisis. One down shows the reality of the trend that we had been going through. There's a dramatic fall off as a result of COVID in March 2020. And now you can see what our latest projections are. So had we not had COVID, we would still have seen a significant gap of nearly 21% between where we were heading pre-financial crisis to where we were post-financial crisis. But we now find ourselves 9% further back, even still, as a result of the impact of COVID. And whilst our projections show some growth, it's pretty benign and pretty low. And certainly when you compare to some of the other G7 countries, and you look at where the US seems to be really powering ahead, we are certainly falling behind others. Inflation. We all know where inflation's been. It was up at around about 11%. Now that's we call a headline CPI inflation. Now headline incorporates the effect of energy prices and food, and everyone's felt the impact of that over the last couple of years. When you come down to services and core, the underlying part has perhaps been hovering around about 6 or 7%. Now it's come back. Headline has come back as we've seen energy prices come back down, and certainly over the last few months we've been talking about supermarket prices coming back. It's coming back, but how quickly it's now going to fall is a massive debate. We heard today the interest rates as of midday today. The Bank of England announced for the second month running that interest rates are going to stay held at 5.25%. Now that's good news because they're not going up, and that would suggest that perhaps we've reached the peak. But they also announced that they were seeing lower growth projections than they were projecting a month or two ago. So just looking about inflation, we said it does come back down, but it's coming down slowly. And actually, what we're seeing here is that we actually think there may be a slight increase in inflation over the next couple of months. The next slide will show that's really driven by potentially spike back up in energy prices with the increase in the energy cap. And that might still lead to a further small increase in interest rates by the Bank of England because they really don't want to let inflation run away with us again. But as you can see, we're predicting there it's going to take to early 2025 before we see inflation back to the original 2% target the Bank of England has set. I mentioned before the blip that might come about is because of the future prices of energy, and energy cap going up 4% next year. That may well just feed through into further increases in inflation in the short term, and question mark, does that then go into a small further adjustment up in interest rates? But as I said, longer term, while we may see it up there, the financial markets do think we have seen the peak of the interest rates. And I think overall that's a good news. I think that gives for us as organisations, which rely heavily on debt, but also as individuals that have mortgages, I think to have greater certainty is good for business and is good for us as individuals. It will give us more confidence to make investments, knowing where we're going to go. We should start to see pricing come down as well as the banks start putting less risk of increases in interest rates into the current day pricing. And clearly it may start to get the property market moving again. And I realise I'm at a property conference, so I guess to start seeing momentum and movement in the property market, both in the residential and the commercial market, would be a real positive. It underpins this economy, it gets the economy moving, it supports many, many businesses. Whilst the MPC closely monitoring the pressures around inflation, they're also very much looking at the tightness on the labour market. What does that mean in terms of wage growth and services price inflation? So again, what we're seeing here is we are still seeing, and this was pretty prevalent, we are still seeing some relatively high pressure coming through on wages. It's coming back a bit, and perhaps we're starting to see the indications that wage inflation is coming in less than underlying headline inflation, and that is really, really important. The bank needs to see wage inflation coming in under inflation. At that point, we may start to help to see inflation coming down. So we're starting to see signs of that, and personally, when I look at all the clients that I serve, who many of them are finding the outlook becoming more increasingly challenging, I certainly think the pay review round that people are going through this time is certainly more cautious and less bullish in terms of the salaries increases than we were this time last year. I think that's been reflected. The tightening, it's been the pressures on costs that the business is seeing from sort of supplies, from cost of bank debt. They can't afford to go out with the 8, 9, 10, 11% inflation rises that many businesses were having to provide last year to ensure that they kept their staff and kept the valuable talent they've got. And then I suppose that leads on to, I guess, the labour market itself. It is starting to cool, and I think that is part of what feeds into the salary increases. A cooling labour market means we don't need to pay these double-digit pay rises that we're seeing in some sectors. There is the challenge, I think, of inactivity, increasing levels of inactive people, but we are starting to see unemployment starting to creep up, and I think whilst we don't want to see unemployment, I think there's an element of that will help because it will feed through. People won't be inclined to move jobs so quickly, people won't have so much high expectations on salary increases. All that will start to feed into the falling inflation. Not least though, that's one part of the contributing factor of inflation. We mustn't forget that importance of energy prices and food prices. They do need to come down as well to bring down that underlying headline rate further. Longer term, I guess really we're talking much more about what are the mega trends and the trends that businesses I think need to embrace, businesses need to think about changing, adapting to. Often, we did a global CEO survey earlier, and the headline that came out of that was many CEOs around the world were saying, we have got to change to survive. Now, it isn't change to survive overnight, but that's over a 5 to 10 year period. We have got to adapt, change our business models to take on board some of these mega trends to survive. Otherwise, new business models are going to come along and surpass us. And some of the things, well, how quickly could that really happen? But if you look back and think about how long the iPhone has been, that came out in 2007, you think about how that little device has changed our world. It is our mini computer. We rely entirely upon it, from banking to where we travel to things we do at work. It is our life. And that's in a very, very short space of time. I think about, I used to have a client, Thomson Directories. Remember the Blue Book? Think about what happened to them and Yellow Pages when the internet really took off, when Google came out. Business models were turned upside down and some businesses died very, very quickly. There are trends out there which may lead some businesses to fail because they'll just be surpassed. But there's lots of trends that businesses are now focusing on in terms of what is the challenge that we need to adapt to, but what's the opportunity that it provides. So climate change, I think, is obvious. There's a massive investment, massive pools of money around the world going into embracing changing the way we do things for the benefit of climate change. and that can be down from being about our carbon emissions to biodiversity. That is critical for us to adapt, not just in terms of the planet that we live on, but it's also critical. It's often critical to the supply chain that we're in, and our customers, be it businesses or consumers, want to know what we are doing as organisations in embracing climate change and the things that we're doing to work differently, to operate differently, to travel differently, to help the planet. And for those businesses that don't embrace, don't adapt that, there will be customers, businesses and consumers that will make choices about who they buy from. And increasingly, those customers are making choices not to go with people that are not embracing. So it becomes, I think, a business imperative. Technological disruption, AI, and we've got the massive AI event going on at Bletchley Park at the moment, led by Rishi Sunak. I think it's great that we as a country are leading the way there. It's great that, some of you are aware that Southampton University recently got £31 million of funding to lead on a global responsible AI project. That's a leading project for the UK, and it's great that it's at one of our leading academic institutions on the South Coast. But AI is going to radically change the way we work, the way we operate at home, the way we do business. We're already starting to see it, not just in what the services are that PwC provide, but also what our clients are thinking of doing. I came from up in Uxbridge this morning. I was talking to a client there about it, and that one was just a small thing that they were doing, that they were talking about, was using Microsoft Copilot. Plug it on in a meeting, have it recording, you get a transcript, stick it into an AI tool, ask that AI tool to abbreviate it into some minutes of the record of the board meeting, and within 5 seconds it's done. And you've got a really accurate capturing of that meeting. That's as opposed to the company secretary writing up the notes and spending a couple of hours doing it. These things are changing, and these things are going to drive improvement in productivity. So technology, it will disrupt the way we do things, but I think the challenge is how you embrace it to improve the way you do things and drive out efficiency. Demographic shift. I think there's two things here. I think this is about people moving from parts of the world which are clearly less attractive. They've got a conflict and migration agenda, which is a challenge in terms of those countries they're heading to managing, but also it's an age demographic. With an increasingly ageing population, that puts increasingly greater demands on our healthcare, on our housing system, and I would suggest in terms of the money that the government needs to have to support that. So that demographic shift is increasingly creating more and more challenges for the society to live in. The fracturing world, I think we can see it in what's happening in Israel and Ukraine and other risks in territories out in Asia Pacific. The world is becoming more fractious. Potentially, it's probably becoming a lot more dangerous as well. And I think we'll only see more of that to come. And then I guess with NATO, we're probably going to see a number of countries joining up into NATO that haven't been in NATO before over the coming years. And then just social instability. I think this all links together. Views are much more polarised. I was listening to GB News on the way home. I'm not sure I should be, but there are very much polarised views now, and they are creating real conflict and disagreement. And some of the protests we're seeing in a free democracy, the risk there is that we end up into quite violent disagreement, which could be, I think, quite a frightening place. So, but those are I would just, if I was to take away from there in terms of your businesses and organisations, think about economy, climate change, and technological disruption are the key takeaways for me. What are you doing to embrace climate change into your organisations? What are you doing to sell it to your customers? And then the technological distribution. How are you going to use technology to deliver things, to give it a better customer experience, or to deliver things more efficiently? So, some final key messages just before I wrap up. Inflation, CPI is falling. We think it will come down to 2% by Q4 this year or early next year. But I think there are some potential kinks in the road that we may come across. UK growth, we're not in recession, but we're certainly not in an exciting place. And certainly we can see other countries, particularly the US, powering away. And we may yet still see revisions, not necessarily just to us, but to other countries that might suggest perhaps we're not even in the 5th place out of 7 as we think we are today. Interest rates, I think they're at a peak. As I said, there's a risk that we could see a small increase because of energy prices, but it would be short term. But ultimately, I'm sure the bank wants to start to see it decline. And then the megatrends, I think you do need to look longer term, think about some of those megatrends that are there and how they will impact your business and how you respond. So thank you very much for that.